Take it away, Morgan.
Hi. It's so exciting to see how many people this was your first time taking one of these courses because this is one of my first time giving a course like this. So um, we will be working through this together. There's so much stuff to cover, so I'm kind of going to jump in pretty quickly, but I really appreciate all of you being here and working on this with me. This is by far one of my favorite ways to work. I've been doing freelance work for a lot of different companies. I've worked in many different media, and this is the one process that I always go back to because it's so seamless, so much fun. When they came to me and asked what I wanted to teach about, this was hands down my favorite process and something I'm really excited about. So, yeah, I thought a giraffe was fun. What's funny is my husband actually took my kids to the zoo while I'm teaching this right now. So maybe my daughter will take some pictures in front of the giraffes there. But in any case, yeah, we have a lot to start with. I'm going to jump in with the marker. I know that you all were instructed to do line work or transfer from what was provided. If you didn't get to that, or you're struggling with maybe the line work or how to start that process, you can actually just work straight from this as well. Um, the marker and pencil, I believe, will layer on top of this just fine. I did a little demo on another piece earlier and it worked out quite well. So as far as just understanding the process and having fun with the marker and pencil, you can work on top of this. If you have the line work done, that's great as well. I have mine in front of me here. And yeah, I guess let's go ahead and jump in because we have so much to talk about. All righty. So with the line work, my favorite process is doing a colored pencil line work. There's two reasons for that. I like to do the lines colored because it saves a lot of time when you're actually working down the road. At first, it takes a little bit of extra time to get the colors right along the edges the way that you'd like them. But when you go in with the marker, you don't have to worry about line work at all. It's almost like doing an adult coloring book. It's set in stone, solidified. Colored pencil doesn't go anywhere. You have this nice, clean surface to go in on, and it just makes it a lot more fun and a little bit carefree when you're working on the marker. Another reason is that marker and the colored pencil, it won't blend it around. So Premier colored pencils are wax based, and because of that, anything that's water based won't blend it at all, which is perfect. So everything stays nice and clean and ready to layer on top of. So I'm going to actually go in. I have my reference on a tablet. You could print yours out, whatever works best for you. I like to go in with midtones. So with marker, it's really forgiving. It's an extremely forgiving medium because you can work from dark to light. You can work from light to dark. The process ends with you just meeting in the middle with midtones and blending it together, which I will show you. So I'm going to actually go in with the brown right now. I'm sorry for shaky hands. This is my first time teaching a course like this, so I'm a little nervous, but we have just the brown marker. I'm going to go in with some of these spots just to show you. It's literally just filling in some of these areas like this, and it comes together so quickly. This isn't quite as dark as we want it, but we don't want to go in with the black quite yet, because when you're blending the markers, it might muddy up some of the midtones. So if you're looking at the reference, these are all quite dark brown. So I'm just going in and filling all of these spots in. I love this process so much because honestly, and really, you could just stop with the marker. Even the manga set that you all were sent, I did the artwork for that. And that's just a marker drawing, a chisel tip marker drawing. And it makes beautiful art just in itself. But I always like to go a little, push it, the detail and everything, as far as you can go. And I'll show you towards the end of this course some fun ways that even beyond what I'm doing here, you can push the detail even further. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. And because we're working in marker, you can layer so much more detail and pack in so much more just texture on top. So I'm probably going to stop right there and then go in with the orange, pale vermilion. I'm using the fine tip right now because these are smaller areas that we're filling in. There is going to be a point when we're blending everything together that we're going to be using the wider chisel tip. But for right now, we're doing this. And I'm going to show you how just this part here, we're going to make into a gradient. So it looks nice and rainbowy. We got the full spectrum of colors on this. That's my jam. I love, why not? You know? Why not
Morgan,
do colors?
I do have a quick question. Joyce is asking, is there a trick to getting the caps off the markers? She said she's struggling a little bit to get them off.
Especially with a newer pack, I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes you do have to just, besides you putting a little, muscle into it, I don't have any like cool tips with that. I would say probably, especially if you're using extra force, to do it away from your drawing, because every once in a while I've had it where there's like little specks of pigment that come out when you're like forcing it out of the cap. But yeah, with a newer marker especially, it's almost like you need some like WD-40 on this to grease it. But I know what you mean. Yeah, there's not any, I don't have any special tips for that part, unfortunately. But I struggle with that too sometimes. That's funny that you said that. But yeah, my main thing is maybe just to not do it next to the, so for this part where I'm making these colors a little bit more of a gradient, I added some of the processed red, and that'll just help these be the right value that we want. That's the most important thing. And if you notice, sometimes I'm even going outside of the lines a little bit. It doesn't really matter because we're going to be blending this all together. Now these two colors together, because we have a more limited palette for this. We don't have, the full range of colors that we're working with. So we just use a little bit of blending to make the colors that we need to make a smoother gradient. When I get done blending in some of these midtones, these lighter shades, we're going to go back in and pop in some of the black or, the darker details at the very end to make it really crisp and stand out more. But right now, we're not even worrying about that. We're just going in with these midtones. I feel like I'm working pretty slow. I hope you guys can keep up. We're trucking right now, but when the blending happens, it starts going a little bit faster. But there, we're starting to get just filled in. It's literally like an adult coloring book. Like I said, once you have the colors, the colored line work mapped out. So we're starting to go into the purple territory, which is fine. So I think we're going to go in with this lilac now and start working our way over towards these spots. And we're going to start just trucking on these spots. We can fill this in. This is such a relaxing process. I always enjoy this part. And then we're going to move on to the next color. So that was kind of the area where it's a little bit softer. When we get in with the lighter colors, it'll soften everything even more. And then we'll go back in, like I said, with the darker colors and kind of pop out some of the, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I always end up with a bunch of markers clumped at the bottom. I never put them back where I should. Anyways, we're going to go in with the blue now. This is going to be more of a green, but we're going to worry about the colored pencil doing that work. Some of these things, we don't have to worry about it being very exact. This is really, we're toning the paper to prepare it for the colored pencil to go on top. With these ones, I'm actually going to go in with the brown as well, because we're working our way back to the brown. I'm going to soften the edge on this one. Actually, let's use a little bit of yellow because it's more of a green color right here. And look, we have a nice green color to work from right there. And then I'm going to put the brown at the bottom, and we have created a full spectrum of color for our colored pencil to go on top. And it's going to be so easy because we're just going to be adding the texture and detail on top. Sometimes I like to stipple a little bit on the edge where I was ending the brown, so it's not such a harsh edge. I'm going to go back in with the blue one more time. And then those spots are done. The other ones we're just doing in brown for now. And when I finish this area, I'll show you how we're going to go in with the other colors. to fill in the whole area with color. But I like to go with these spots first, so everything's kind of mapped out. So when I was making the reference for this drawing, it's funny how much the process has changed over the years. Before, I would try to work from my own pictures sometimes if I went to the zoo and I have a picture of a giraffe, what have you. Other times I would try to do like digital paintings based off of reference images. And I would like combine a lot of layers, digitally painting, and it was such an extensive process. But now, even with this one, I used a little bit of my reference combined with some AI images that I generated. That AI is still a tricky thing. I still had to do quite a bit of editing because AI did not understand how a giraffe snout looks. But it was kind of a fun process. It gave me a lot of good places to start and a lot of fun color options, and the way the spots were colored and stuff, it gave me a lot of stuff to look at. But most of this ended up being a digital painting, and that's how I came up with the reference. I like to work that way because then, you know, it's an original image to begin with. You have, you know, everything's set in stone before you put pencil to paper. That way there's a lot less guesswork and more just a relaxing process where you're just recreating the image that you made digitally. Maybe one day soon I'll make a course on that. That'd be almost a whole course within itself. So see how these spots are a little warm, a little light. So I'm actually going to go on top of those with the blue, and we might go back on top with brown again to get a nice dark and a cooler brown color. These markers you can layer quite a few times before they start bleeding. So you don't have to really worry about that unless you're really saturating an area and going on top multiple times. Then you might need to worry about a little bit of bleeding happening. But overall, they do a great job of staying really crisp. And this might look a little blue, but we're going to go back on top with brown one more time. And then I'm going to work on the top spots, and then we're going to go in with the fun part, which is blending it all together. So those spots are looking about the right color. I'm going to go back in with these ones one more time with the brown, just to make sure they're not too cool. And this is a fun way to like learn how to work with a more limited palette. If you only have just a small handful of colors that you're working with, you can make a dark brown with anything. As long as you have a couple of primary colors, you can make any color you need. So there we go. There's the spots that are about the right shade of brown. Now we're going to be working towards the top a little bit, get some more of these spots filled in. I can't wait until we get to the magic part, which is like layering the colored pencils on top. And it's such a fun process because with colored pencils, I feel like the biggest, not roadblock, but issues that might arise when you're working on a piece for a while and you're trying to get a pretty wide range of detail is that pencils can only work so much together. You can layer only so much until you the maximum amount of, you know, pigment or product that can be layered on top of itself, especially with wax base. So if you work like this, you have a completely toned surface with all of these colors, and you get to just go in and have fun adding in like little pops of highlights, little fur details, stuff like that. And it's already a fully colored image. It's just so much fun. I really enjoy working this way. Okay, so now the spots are getting a little dark again. They're a little bit more cool toned. I'm going to go in with the blue. And we're just going to fill all of these spots in on the face. This manga set ended up working out really well with the colors in this drawing. So now we're getting to the spot where it's a little bit more of the giraffe wrinkles. They have a lot of skin folds. That's why I picked it. There's like cool spots, lots of color, texture. So for this demo, I am going to be just working from the face, the most important part, and working our way out. Obviously, it's a very detailed piece, so I'm not sure we'll be able to finish this one. I'm trying to work nice and slow so you all can see what I'm working with. But we'll start here. I'll show you the full process, and then we'll work our way out. So now with the brown, I'm going to pop in some of these other shadows before I go in with the midtones, and we're going to get blending. I'm going to save the eyes for the Sharpie, the ultra fine point Sharpie. But I'm going to do that after I blend the midtones, because though that stays put quite nicely, that's one of those things you want to save for the very last. It takes a few minutes to dry, and you don't want to risk blending some of that darker color. So right now I'm filling in this area, kind of like the spots, but we're avoiding, there's going to be little hairs in the ears like this. So we're going to just kind of put little strokes to block out this area and not fill that in. That we're going to go in with that nice lilac color and start working on the midtones when we work on the ears. But we want to leave the lightest lights out. As a fun little tip, I've done this a lot with drawings. We're not doing this with this particular piece, but I've worked on a lot of pieces where you literally just get a fine paintbrush like this. You paint in the whitest whites. So like say in the eyes, we want to reserve these little bright white details. This is drawing gum. There's so many different brands. I just got, one on Amazon. That was nice and cheap. You paint those on there. You go on top with marker. When you're done, you rub it off with your finger, and it preserves the white of the paper. And I love it. It's such a fun process. Working with marker in general. But I love that because then you don't really have to worry about something like this where we're kind of working around these areas. And it helps save time, especially if you're working on a big piece that has a lot of tricky little details or highlights that you want to leave out. That way you don't accidentally go over one of them and you're like, whoops, and trying to figure that out, because the colored pencil will layer on top quite nicely, but it can't
Morgan,
give you the widest white. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just so some people can have a little bit of a chance to catch up just a bit. When you're done with that ear, do you mind just like going through the colors that you've worked in so far, just to give a couple seconds,
so
a little bit of
the
time?
Number one that we're using right now is this brown. It's the sienna brown that's in the set. And I'm using that for a lot of these spots because it's a nice mid-tone. It's on the warmer side, so that's why we were layering the blue to get a cooler brown. And that's why in this area, we were layering it with some of the processed red to make it more saturated. But because this is a nice mid-tone, this is what I'm using to block in some of the shadows. We'll be darkening the shadows with the black, the ultrafine Sharpie, towards the end of the process before the colored pencil. But right now we're going in with the brown because it's the easiest to work with. And when we're blending those midtones, it's not going to muddy up the different values that we're going to be adding in. So if I go in with the light blue or the grays, this brown stays put and it won't create any smudging or bleeding or something like that maybe the black marker might. So it's a good safe area so that we're just mapping out some of the spots, some of the darker areas. That way when we go back on top, we don't have to worry about finding them again. Because if you just go in with the midtones, you're going to have problems going back in and figuring out where some of these, it's like a roadmap. So that way when we go on top, it's all right there. And it actually helps soften the edges on some of these little spots because they're not extremely sharp, or they have fur, so we don't want it to appear overly sharp. So I think that we actually have most of these. I'm going to do the brown up here and then I'll take a little break to make sure everybody's caught up. But yeah, you guys, I can't wait to see what you guys post as far as what your different giraffes look like, and that's going to be really exciting. And same with this part, we're going to be like just very lightly adding in just where these shadow areas are. Just a few little strokes like that, that almost look like fur, but we don't have to be too precise. This is going to just be the base, so we don't have to worry too much about what each stroke looks like, if it looks exactly like fur. We're just trying to get the shadows in. Pretty much anything you do at this point, you can fix with the colored pencil on top if you need to. So we're done mapping that out. I think those shadows look pretty good. Alrighty, I'm kind of combing over to make sure I got in some of the darker shadow areas. Like I said, I'm avoiding the eyes right now. I see that there's a really dark area right here, so I'm going to just kind of lock that in. Like that, nothing too crazy. I'm working my way down. I'm kind of just working on this area right now. I'm going to add in this one. And the nostril probably. We'll add a black on top of that at the very end as well. But right now it's good to just map it out with this brown so we know exactly where everything is when we're going over it. So it's not stressful. We're not worrying about, oh, did I go over where a shadow should be, and having to backtrack quite a bit. When you do it this way, once you get this part in, it's going to be such a seamless process when we get to the midtones and then to the colored pencil. Okay.
Morgan, while you're working, do you mind explaining how you transferred your line work to your paper with the color?
So there's multiple processes that you can use when transferring the line work. When I did, because I did the drawing already in a much larger size, I did this one freehand. I just had my reference and I worked by mapping out the spaces from the edge and just worked on the spots and kind of worked that way. But that obviously takes quite a bit longer, especially for beginners. I have no issue at all with just transferring from a screen or from a printout that you might have of the reference. I use just transfer paper when I work that way. With this piece, this one in particular, I just transferred it from the reference. I make sure I do it from a screen. I make sure to flip the image before I transfer it because it will be reversed when you flip over the transfer paper. So you flip the image on the screen. I traced the lines, flipped it over on this piece of paper. I used graphite on this one. The graphite is obviously not the end product or what we're using here with the colored pencil. So I used, I think it was a 2H, a lighter shade of a pencil. It's a firmer core, but a lighter shade. And then I went in with a kneaded eraser after it was transferred and just gently tapped out some of the excess pigment or graphite that might muddy up the colored pencil that I go on top with. I leave just enough so I can see what I'm working with, very light. And then I'm able to go back on top with the colored pencil on top of the graphite and clean everything up. And once I have the colored pencil on top, say like this leaf is a very light graphite, I go in with the green, pressing much harder, more defined lines and get those nice clean lines. And then I go in with a kneaded eraser and just clean any graphite excess that I have up. So that way you are left with just colored line work that's in colored pencil. It's a little bit more of an extensive process at the beginning. I think I explained that a little bit earlier, where it takes a little bit more time to do the line work this way, but it saves so much time down the road. Because if you're working from just graphite with the marker, it will blend out some of the excess. It becomes a little bit muddied up. The line work is a little bit harder to keep in place and remember where all of the areas are that you need, you know, like the little spots and stuff like that. If it was graphite, I'm really bad about smudging stuff with my hands. So I feel like the colored pencil, once you have it down, it just makes everything more set in stone, easier to work with. Everything's solidified, clean. Definitely a process that I recommend, but it is a little bit more extensive, especially when you're transferring over the lines, and then needing to do that extra step with covering it with the colored pencil. But I think you'll see with this piece especially, I didn't have to go back and do anything. Once that was colored pencil, because I made those lines brown, there's nothing else I have to do. Once I fill that in with brown, because the line work is brown, it just goes in seamlessly, all of the color, and makes it so that way, you know, there's nothing else you have to worry about regarding the line work. You don't have to be going back in and erasing out pigment or anything like that. Once you're going in with the marker and the colored pencil, everything's nice and clean. I hope that kind of answered your question. It's easy to ramble on with some of these tips like this, but do you think we might be ready to move along? I don't want to get too far ahead. I can go in with some of the midtones on the snout, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're good. And then we'll have the recording too, so people can go back if they.
Yeah. Alrighty. I'm opening up my reference again. So now that we have some of these colors, and I'm going to pop in this last little spot down here. I don't want to forget this guy. I'm going to go in with some of these midtones and show you how we're going to blend. My favorite part is when I block in the black colors at the end, and it makes everything really crisp and really brings a lot of dimension to the whole image. So right now we're working with, it's quite green in this area. It's a full spectrum of color where we fade into blue and then a purple and then a pink. It's all lighter. Some of our colors are a little bit darker. I'll show you how blending with some of the lighter colors will soften everything. It's okay if it's too dark right now. So some of the midtones might be darker than we're wanting. This is the base for the colored pencil. So that's kind of what we want. We want it to be a little bit darker because the colored pencil will cling onto the darker colors and it'll pop. So I'll show you right now. Let's start with cloud blue. I'm going to just fill in this area with cloud blue and then work my way over with a little bit of the true blue. The true blue is going to seem a little dark, but we're going to quickly go in with, let's see what the lightest color is for this. I think we'll do the French gray. So we're going to blend out the blue with the French gray while it's still wet. So that way it doesn't get saturated too much into the paper and we can't lighten it with the other pigment. So I'll show you. We're going to just, this one's almost exactly the right color. So I'm just going to go in with this completely on top of the spots. You go on top of everything. Colored pencil line work stays put. And it's just such an easy process from this point because you really are, I try to soften the edges a little bit like this. So that way when you blend it out, because this giraffe has fur. And if we do an effect like this, even if everything doesn't blend out seamlessly, it's still going to look exactly how we want it for a base for the colored pencil. It's a little bit darker right here. So I'll stop in a second and show you what we're working with before I go in, because when I go in with the blue, because it is a little dark, we're going to be moving a little bit quicker. So this is what we're working with this area. And again, this was with the cloud blue. And you're able to just go on top of the line work, go on top of the spots, and just add in that color right there. And that's really the process we're going to be working on for the rest of this. You'll notice as we're working with these midtones and blocking all of that in around the face, some of these spots are going to not look as dark as they should towards the end. And that's when we'll go in with the black. I think some of these spots will probably go in with black or go back in with the blue and the brown combo to darken it and make it really crisp. So now we're going to go in with some of the blue. This blue, like I said, is going to be a little dark, so don't be alarmed. We're going to just go in almost like where some of the wrinkles are, some of these areas like this, and then we're going to blend it out. There's a little bit right here. Again, we're using almost like a fur-like pattern while we're adding the marker, especially in this area. This is one of those trickier areas where there's a lot of transitions between the colors. So we're going to soften everything up quite a bit in just a second after I get this mapped in here. So we're going to stop there. We're going to go in with the French gray while everything's still wet. And we're going to just blend. We're going to add quite a bit of pressure. I'm not sure if you all have a colorless blender, but that would work fine here as well. Depending on what set you have or what you're using, you're going to want to use some of the lighter colors for that part of the blending. I'm using the French gray because that's what we have in the set. And we're just going on top. We're using quite a bit of pressure, and we're not worrying about fur details with this part because we're just trying to lighten up that blue and blend it out like that. So I'm stopping in these areas where it starts to turn yellow because that is what we're going to do next. We do have a cream color, or the eggshell. So I'm going to prep this area really quickly. We're going like that. And it's nice because this eggshell color is lightly tinted yellow, but it's mixing in with this blue and making that green that we kind of need for that area. If some of the colored pencil blends around a little bit, I would not worry about it. Like right now, some of this brown is blending out a little bit, but that's perfectly fine. Especially when you're working with a drawing like this where there's fur. If anything, just do it with the grain of the fur and let it work with you to create that fur effect. Now I'm going in with some of this green. I'm doing the fine tip and I'm just adding some little fur details like this. We're going to blend it out one more time. We're just trying to create that spectrum of color from the blue to the green. And then we're going to go in with this sunburst yellow. This area right here is quite yellow, so I'm going to just go in with the darkest yellow. That's all we need for that spot. And then I'm going to go in back with the eggshell and just smooth everything out a little bit. Again, when we're doing this part where we're smoothing everything out, we're using a lot of pressure. And it softens those fur details and it blends the colors. Don't worry, you've noticed here, it's not seamless blending. If there's going to be rough edges, it's not going to be the smoothest gradient, but that's fine because, like I said, we're working with fur and we're going on top of colored pencil. So we're not worrying about making everything look super perfect. We're just layering the colors so we have a wonderful base to go on top of with the colored pencil. This time I'm going back in, I noticed that there needed to be a little bit more of this saturated cloud blue. It's a little bit darker over here, so I'm going back in. Like that. To show you the full spectrum, we're going to go over here with some of the processed red. This part's, it's going to be a little dark, so we're going to work from this shadow. This shadow right here, this is why we mapped out some of these spots, because if we did not do this, this is where they would get completely lost. And you don't want to lose those spots. There we go. This whole area can be blocked in with the processed red. Again, we're doing a softer edge on this. We're doing like fur-like strokes out from the spots. I'm not going to go in too much more because it is quite a bit darker. We don't want it to completely wash out the spots. few more right there. Now we're going in. I can do the colorless blender. Let me do the eggshell for this part. We're gonna blend the eggshell that way. I'm gonna go in with cloud blue this way. So right now we're going in with the eggshell, softening the edges. We're using a lot of pressure with this part as well. And we're blending it up this way towards where we're about to work in with some of those oranges and yellows. So this is a good example of, I have not layered on top of there yet, but I have here. It's much softer, much smoother gradient. Not perfect, but a wonderful base. So we're done with that part. I'm gonna go back in with the cloud blue for this part right here while it's still wet. You do wanna work with some haste during this process, because we are trying to blend the pigment while it's still wet and saturated the paper. The good part is we have, I'm gonna do a little bit more of the pink and blend it that way just one more time, because it's a little bit more pink in this area. I'm gonna do a few more of these stripes. And back in with the eggshell. Like that. And the paper is already pretty saturated there. And it's almost like you want the paper to start bleeding in this area. Let me open my reference again. It's almost like you want the colors to bleed. That's what we're kind of the goal here with these midtones, is to have them bleed together and be smooth. I'm going to fill in some more of the cloud blue here, because I think I want a little bit more of a smoother transition between the blue and the green. We don't have to worry about how dark that's getting, like I said earlier, because we're going on top of colored pencil. We just want it to be smooth, and we want it to be the right colors. So that way, when we do go on top of colored pencil, we don't have to worry about filling in the paper and building up the colored pencil too much to get to the values we want. We've already done that with the marker. All we have to worry about when we go in with colored pencil is popping in the highlights, popping in the shadows, and then adding texture and detail. The color and the values have already been put in, and it makes the process just so much easier when you're working with colored pencil. So now I'm going to go in. This is quite orange down here. We're going in with the pale vermilion, and we're going to just smooth this all together. So this whole cheek area and this snout are done. Both of these areas right here and right here, we're going in with straight pale vermilion. Then we're going to blend back into the other colors with the brick beige. I think will be a good blending color. And then on the snout, some eggshell. So let's go in with the pale vermilion. This whole area is just completely like an orange red.
Just giving you a time check, Morgan, that we're at 1:45. So we have about 45 minutes. We're halfway through.
Right. Good thing we're working on the cheek, folks. That's what I was saying. This process, it's when you're working quite detailed, it's hard to do a full drawing in an hour and a half, but I hope at least with this area, we can get through the whole process and you can see very clearly how you work with the rest of it, at least with, and this is the most challenging area, especially with all of the little spots and wrinkles and fur details that we're going to be working on. So we're going in with the pale vermilion. We're stopping right here. I'm going to do a few fur strokes like that. Alrighty. And then right down here, all pale vermilion as well. This part's easy. You're just completely blocking in the color down here. We're keeping some of these really cool areas. There's two pockets of cool area right here. We're just keeping the pale vermilion from that area. And I'm going to clean up this edge right here with some more pale vermilion. We're just kind of going with the pale vermilion now that we got this gradient done, because then we're going to finish this whole snout area very quickly. I'm going to do a few softer edge pieces right here, few little fur strokes like that. Now we're going to block in this whole area with the pale vermilion. You can do this with a chisel tip side. You can do this with a fine point side. The only thing to remember is we're not going to do a straight line here. We're going to do some of these softer little strokes. These will read really well. As fur, especially once they're blended out, kind of like in the other areas of the snout. I feel like this course could be like 5 hours long. All right. Getting close to finishing this area being filled in. I'm going to add some pale vermilion on these little eye folds right here. Bring it this way. All right. And then we're going to work our way down. We're almost done filling this in. We're going to blend it and we're going to hop into colored pencil after I make this eye or the eyes black and darken some of the spots. The colored pencil part actually takes quite a bit less than the marker. Surprisingly, it's by far the funnest part for me because I'm like, now all the meat and potatoes is done. Line work's done. All the values are in place. All the colors are there. Then you just get to go in and add like little fur details, you know, crisp the edges, add the whitest whites, the darkest darks. Everything comes together really quickly once you're working on that part as well. So I'm nearing where I think I want to be with this, adding in a few more like that. I think we're good there. I see a little bit more here. So it's good to just check your reference. I see like the, you know, where there's big blocks of that. I see an area right here where you could just go in with the pale vermilion because it's almost exactly the right color. And I might as well just do this ear right here so we can get the whole face blocked in. This part, you don't have to worry too much about blending quickly with the edges because this is almost like a shadow, especially this part. So we just make sure that we do those nice soft edges. I'm going to do this part up here, and then we're going to blend it and get to the colored pencil. I could work on this marker part for so long. You can get quite detailed with the marker if you want. I've done that on a lot of drawings where you add a lot of fur details, things like that. You can get marker quite detailed within itself. So there we go. I'm thinking we're pretty much done after I finish this area. And we'll blend out with the eggshell. Just a moment. Might add some of that yellow in there. All right, in this whole area right here. Like that. Don't have to be too detailed. All right, I think that looks good. So we're gonna go in before the eggshell and just plop in some of this yellow. That's gonna finish the gradient for us because then when we go in with the eggshell, it's gonna be a full gradient from the pale vermilion all the way to the eggshell. This is our mid-tone, and this is what will make it look nice and smooth. So we're going in a little bit more pressure on those edges. Anywhere where you see that yellow, where it's the most saturated, we're just popping this in, keeping the edges disrupted with the little fur lines like that. All along that edge, down here like that. Just like that. See how easily that comes together? Let's see what other areas we have right along here. We're doing the same thing where we're just kind of helping that blend. Might as well do this now while we're here. Work all the way down like that, leaving this area because that's perfect for the eggshell to go right in this area and make it seamlessly how we'd like it. But we're going to work our way down. We're avoiding the whitest whites. And that's what I was talking about with the drawing gum, is if you're a little apprehensive about that part, it seems a little tricky for you, you could put in the drawing gum in the area that has the whitest whites, and it completely preserves the paper for you. Oftentimes, people are familiar with the product because a lot of marker artists use it. Watercolor artists. You don't hear about it as much with the marker, but it works really well with marker as well. I love using it for marker. We're almost done filling this part in. I'm going to go back in with a little bit of this pale vermilion just to fill in the shadow. I'm doing a jagged line. I'm just basically zigzagging the marker across that area. Going back in with the yellow, smoothing it out. And doing a few little stippling on the edge here because it's a very soft gradient and we want it to fill in more seamlessly in that spot. So we do a little bit of stippling right across the snout right there and right here. All right, now we're ready to go in with that eggshell color and just smooth everything out. Just right across. We pretty much mapped out all of the areas that we would be initially worried about. Just like that. I'm going to do the same here, but I'm going to leave this brightest area untouched. Over here, we're doing a cooler color, so we're leaving that alone as well. We're just going across all of the edges and smoothing it out. I'm leaving a whitest little white area right here. You can do that with colored pen or block that in with colored pencil afterward as well, so I wouldn't worry too much. Mapping in some of these areas. This turns a little pink. What I'm gonna do, because it's such a soft pink, I'm not gonna worry about the marker with this part. I'm gonna fill it in with the eggshell, and we're gonna go in with the colored pencil, and that's when you're gonna add the soft pink color. This turns a little blue up here. So I'm gonna go in with the cloud blue. Just like that. It starts to get really light in this area, so we're gonna just go like that. This is a little bit of a shadow here, so I'm gonna work my way down. I feel like that's where we're gonna just cut off for the demo. This part of the cheek, instead of working all the way down the neck, because I do want to get to the colored pencil part here in a minute. I'm going to add some cloud blue right here so you can see how clean the edge is going to be. I love when you do that and you just block in some of these values right next to that brightest white edge, and it creates a nice crisp highlight right there without much work at all. With this area as well, I'm going to work with that mostly on colored pencil. Right now I am going to go in with some sunburst yellow on this ear. Then I gotta jump into the colored pencil, so we have some time to talk about that as well. Right now I'm just blending that out quickly. Blending this part out. And we're leaving that soft blue for the colored pencil. Can work on this shadow just a second, like that. I'm using the chisel tip marker, and I'm lightly with more pressure and then less pressure and just lifting off. And it should create a pretty nice gradient for you to work with. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be exactly what we need for this face. Right now I'm doing the same with the other eyebrow. Brow bone. Giraffes have pretty interesting anatomy. When I was doing this reference image, their snouts and noses and nostrils and everything, it's pretty interesting when you're trying to get it right. And I'm like, I think that's what their snout looks like. I had to look at a bunch of different images and stuff. Okay, so there we go. I'm gonna go in with probably some of that gray right around the eye before we pop in that black, because we don't want to blend on top of the black. So I'm going in like this. It will lighten up when it dries to probably exactly the value we want in that area. I'm kind of blending into this blue a little bit, saving this area to be lighter. And then we're going to go in with those shadows real quick, and you can see what I mean. Going anywhere where around the eye there needs to be a little bit more of a shadow. I'm probably going to go over this area just briefly as well. Like I said earlier, it's better to have the marker be almost a little bit darker than you'd like, because it's quite easy to lighten it with the colored pencil. I'm also going to go in a few flicks like I was talking about on the other ear, where I'm just going in with the gray to map out this part of the ear. I think we're going to do the yellow like we did into the pale vermilion. So this is, I'll show you how you can work in reverse as well. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm working with the lighter color. No matter which way you work, you're going to come back with the midtone and blend. You can work light to dark, dark to light. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Now I'm going back in. I'm just showing you how you can get like a pretty smooth gradient if you want. It's all about pressure and how saturated the paper is. So there we go. Let's get the black in the eye area, because that's going to really set things apart right away. So we're going in with our Sharpie, our fine tip marker. We're leaving out, when we did the line, we circled some of these highlights in the eye. We're leaving those completely out. We're just drawing around them and filling in only the blackest area. So we're just going in, filling in the whole area. We wanted to make sure to do the marker blending around this area before we got to this part, because those Sharpie stays put quite well. Especially if you're drawing quickly, you can accidentally blend out some of the pigment and it creates dark areas that are not really what you want, especially around the eye where you want everything to be nice and crisp. So we're just filling that in. Almost done with the eye. We got some eyelashes. Again, I mapped these out. So we're just going to leave those. You can always go back in and clean up more. You don't want to go too overboard at first and not be able to really pop in the highlights, but I do have a workaround for that as well. So we have these brightest highlights. We're keeping them out. If you accidentally cover up really important highlights, like the shine in the eye, and you're like, oh no, you can put in colored pencil, but it's not going to be that extremely crisp white that you want for the eye. I will show you in just a moment a tip. So for the eyelashes, we're going to gently do little hair strokes down. I would not go too crazy with this part, because the colored pencil is what will shine here by making the hairs really fine at the ends and things like that. That's where the colored pencil shines. So we have some of that mapped in there. That comes around like this. We're getting the eye mapped out. This is actually all black right here. There's a little highlight. There's a double highlight. You can kind of wing it a little bit too. Like I just accidentally dipped into that too much. That's totally fine. Nobody's going to be looking at this and then looking at your reference and being like, hey, there's a little area here that it looks like you accidentally put some black there. That's not supposed to be there. Nobody's going to know. As long as there are the highlights there that make the eye pop and look alive. There we go. We got that mapped in. I'm going to do the other eye really quickly, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with saving a spot. If you accidentally covered it up and you're wanting it to be the whitest white. There we go. Okay, so now we have the eyes mapped in with the black, which immediately makes the drawing look that much more done. I'm gonna go in with some of these other areas really quickly, the nostril especially, where we want it to be the darkest dark. We want it to be completely black. Like that. There's an area under here that's the same. A few of these spots we can go in with, but I think I want to jump in with the colored pencil here in a second. So we can do that with colored pencil as well. This process is really flexible. So there's no specific way you have to work. Like you don't have to do certain shadows with marker. You can do a back and forth process as well with the colored pencil. It's whatever really works. I could go in there with the black. Let me do that really quickly. Just filling in that shadow. There's a completely black shadow here by the ears. We're mapping that in before I go in with the colored pencil. Leaving those little hair areas. It's better to leave more the lighter color than covering up too much. Like that. Okay. This is probably a good time to jump into the colored pencil. I am going to show you what I was talking about. So sometimes when I'm working on, this is an empty marker, but white paint pens. I had one over here. But 100% easiest way, if I cover up some of those spots, you go in with a fine point white paint pen. There's so many brands out there. There's so many different products you can use for that. I just recommend a white paint pen. You could just go boop, just pop the highlight right back in there and it's not a big deal whatsoever. I love using that process, especially if there's some areas like this where there's little white fur details or things like that that just didn't come back out when you're working on the colored pencil. This is what I'm about to show you. So we got our white colored pencil. This will get you pretty far though. So I'm going back in. It goes on top so well. And we're just adding in some of the highlights of this fur. I'll show you better, maybe right down here. It's quite a bit lighter. And immediately you're able to add in the whitest whites between these wrinkles right here. And it just makes it look that much more detailed in just moments. When you have this whole drawing filled in and you go in with the colored pencil, it's just the most fun because it's drawing almost feels like it's already done and you're just going on top and making the detail and everything like that just that much more. So there's a few areas like that, and we could blend out some of these edges. The white pencil is a great resource as far as even just using it for blending. See how easy that goes on top? So I want to have a little fur detail right here. It's just so bright and it layers on top so well. You can even just go in here and stipple in some of these little fur details. This is really great process to use when working, especially when you're drawing nature, when you're drawing leaves, for instance, and you want to just do the little veins in the leaf. I can just go in, I'll show you just really quickly, just the full process. You go in with just the green. You can do it like this as well. Just the green is all you need for the marker. This is the mid-tone. You could do this with the giraffe as well if you wanted, with any process. We're just doing it a little bit more detailed because then there's even less work that you have to put in when you're trying to make things detailed or filling in spots and stuff like that. If you already have that done with the marker, then it saves so much time. But there, we have that colored in with just the green marker. Now I'm going to go in with the shadows. There's some veins like this. There's a heavy shadow on this side. We're just going right in with the darkest shadow. Softly blocking in some of this shadow area right here like that. Putting in some of the veins. There's also a little bit of a extra color added in here. The shadow turns a little bit orange, but in any case, we have the shadow like this. We're already almost done drawing a leaf. Otherwise, with the colored pencil, if you did this with just colored pencil, it would get built up. You can still obviously achieve a great deal of detail. It takes quite a bit longer. Something like that. Go in with the brightest colors. White. Right across the edge there, there's a highlight across this whole edge. Boop. Just pop it in like that. This is just a summary of the whole process, I suppose. The whole reason that marker is being used is because it's so easy to layer on top. Like that. Gonna add a little bit of orange to this part of the shadow. Blend it out with the colorless blender, or you can use the white or the green. Has a little bit of a highlight right here. Because this is marker, you could just block this in like that. Clean up the edges. That's one of my favorite parts at the end, is just cleaning up the edges. Blocking in the darkest values. This spot over here has a little bit of shadow, and then you can add the green at the very end, and you are done with a leaf. A good way to prevent that, this is a new set, so I haven't done it yet, but if you live in a place where it's warm, if you keep your pencils in a warmer area, like your car, I've seen people like preheat their oven to the lowest setting and turn it off and let it just be warm. And since this is wax based, it helps, I guess, re-adhere the cores back together. If you happen to get a set, that's just what a part of the process with wax based pencils. I guess that's a good thing to know, is just how to work with some of the products based off like what they're made out of. But that's a fun little tip. If you're having problems with your cores breaking, keep your pencils in a warm place, at least for a short period of time, and let them kind of work their way back together, the cores. All right, so we're going to go back to the giraffe. That was just an example of just with plain green marker. You could go on with the shadow, the highlight, blend back with a mid-tone, and you're done with the leaf. You know, and that's the process that we're working on with this. I'm going to go back in with some of these darkest colors to show you how the colored pencil really makes it pop. I'm going to go in with some black on these spots. I'm going lightly with the black. These spots down here especially are quite dark. So we're
Morgan,
mm-hmm.
Just a question about the blender. Cecilia is saying that I find sometimes the colorless blender leaves a gritty or hazy look. Am I using it wrong?
No. So the colorless blender, I highly recommend only using it for final blending. I would not use it at the beginning of a blending process. If you saw when I used it on this, it was the highlights and shadows were already in. I keep it more towards the highlights because it does make the shadows hazy. To combat that, you can go on top with the shadows one last time to you know, really make them pop and set them apart from any haziness that might happen from the blender. The haziness only really happens, from what I've noticed, on the shadows. So I'd particularly avoid that area. Honestly, I don't even use the colorless blender a good portion of the time. I find that most of the best blending you can get is just with the midtones. You usually don't even really need a colorless blender. I think for this process, I wanted to show how it could, you know, merge the highlights and the shadows quickly, but you don't even really need it, honestly. I don't use it most of the time with my professional work. Just blending with the midtones. So here we have the black mapped out here. I just lightly put it in some of these darker spots. We're gonna go in with the brown or the Tuscan red. Looks kind of like a darker brown to me. And we're just gonna smooth those areas out quickly. And then I'll show you how I add in some of the mid-tone colored pencil to smooth out some of these fur details. Overall, you know, the whole process is a lot of working back and forth. And I think sometimes when I've seen other instructors before, they make it seem like there's a very specific set in stone way that you need to be working. And that's just not true with this process, at least. The most important thing is to just try to achieve as much of the values as you can with the marker, and then go on top with the details with the colored pencil. That's pretty much it. Working from light to dark, working from dark to light, it doesn't really matter as much with this process. You can go either way. Like I said before, it's just about meeting in the middle with the midtones. So there's not really a way you can, I don't want to say mess it up, but it's a very forgiving process. So we have some of those blocked in. Again, you don't have to go in to smooth some of this out. So there's some texture on this. I always have a kneaded eraser on standby to tap out some of the excess. If there's little flyaways, little, you know, chips of the pigment, to get that off so you don't smudge it across your drawing. That could build up over a period of time and make it a little bit more challenging to clean up at the very end. So now I'm just going in with this green. And this is making it so that green that we wanted to do. That's why I was like, don't worry about the green. Well, it'll sort itself out because we have the green pencil now. And I'm lightly just going in and making that gradient even smoother. And now I'm going to go in with the blue. The blue was the one that I was like, this is a little dark, but it's okay because we are going in with this. That's also why sometimes I go in with the brightest whites first, because it's really hard to cover it up. So you don't have to, it basically sets it aside for you. Makes it a little bit easier to be like, okay, I'm not going to cover over that part, because colored pencil does only have so far you can push it, only so many layers you can build up. So you want to set aside some of these important areas so you don't cover them up, like some of the fur details and things like that. So I'm just softly going in and just blending out some of this blue area that we wanted to be a little bit more of like a soft blue. This is almost like a teal, so I'm going in with the blue and bringing it over like that. This part, so in this set, we don't have a purple, and that's okay. So I'm going in with the blue. And the good thing is we had this cloud blue mixed with the processed red, almost made the exact purple that we needed. That's another thing, is if you have a limited selection of colored pencils, working with marker first, you already have the colors down pretty much. Now you're just adding on some of the detail. Let's go in with the fluorescent pink to show you what I mean with that. So this pink wasn't, with the marker, wasn't bright enough. We have fluorescent pink now. This combined with the processed red makes the perfect pink that we want for this part of the snout, which really makes it pop. So I'm blending this on top of some of these spots. We're gonna bring out some of these spots, see how they kind of got lost? We mapped it out with the marker though, so we know exactly where they are still. And I can go back on top of the darker color and it's not an issue. If we didn't map them out first, they would have probably gotten lost and you'd have to be sitting there for a hot minute trying to figure out where your spots are. Or if you're working on a leaf where some of the dewdrops are, if you're working on a, you know, turtle where some of the pattern on the shell was. So this hot pink, and that's why I picked this color for this giraffe, is especially when when you're recreating basically these colors right on these spots, the hot pink just makes it pop, and it just really makes that kind of, I was a big fan of Lisa Frank when I was little, that Lisa Frank rainbow effect, because why not? Why not just go out on color? So now I'm going in with the poppy red and just darkening some of this. I'm doing kind of like a jagged, almost like I'm doing the fur strokes, almost like a zigzag, and I'm kind of just doing fur strokes. I'm not filling it in because it's already the color that we want. I'm just going on top and adding some of the fur strokes. You can even add even more pressure. The fur, it's always good to pay attention to the direction of the fur. So the fur on this giraffe goes down the snout like that and around the cheek. So we're following that pattern when we're working with the fur to really give that dimension and depth with just fur strokes. And I'm going to go in with even just the pink right here and do some fur strokes. Because not everything is about smooth blending. So I want some highlights right here. I'm going to go in with my white. And there's a highlight right here. We don't have to be very precise with it right now. And then we add some fur strokes. We're not doing a super smooth gradient. So we're just adding on top of the marker the way it was. We're just adding some fur strokes, creating the direction of the fur. Like that. Already, I think we're getting some pretty good dimension and some pretty good fur detail without much work. And you go on top of the spots and stuff because we're going to go back in on those last and really make them pop. But right now I'm going in with the white and just adding in fur details in the highlight spots. Right here's a big highlight. That's the one we set aside at the end that I was like, okay, we don't want to cover this one up with marker completely. Plus it's nice. See there how I just did a little smudge? Usually you could just go back on with more pressure. It's kind of a weird trick that I do sometimes, but if it gets built up and you have a spot that's not the pigment you want, I go in with the back side of my pencil and you can gently scrape up some of the excess and go back on top if it gets too built up. Like that. Let's go in with some blue right here. These are pretty cool. Highlights there. Actually, and this is what I was talking about, you can go back and forth like, oh, I actually want to go back on the top of this. You can, as long as the colored pencil is not built up all the way, the marker will still go on top. If the colored pencil is built up all the way, you're not gonna be able to go back on top of marker because it is wax based. So that's why when working further down, you want to make sure that you have the marker pretty much how you want it before you go on top of the colored pencil, because there are some limitations with going back on top. So there, we got that exactly the value we wanted. I'm adding in some fur details as well. Smooth out the edges. I think that this warmer shadow right here, we could do something like, the red might be a little bit too dark. Let's go in with the yellow really lightly. This is showing how like this is not warm at all. We're going to warm this up. All of that is still mostly, so I'm going to go in with the red, but I'm going to be really gentle with this. Blend that out from this red area. Gently put that in this area. You don't have to blend with the colorless blender on this. Sometimes I just, if my fingers are warmed up, it's wax. You can really just blend with your hand sometimes. I do that quite often. I don't think I've used the blending sticks really, but you can, even with these spots, you can just blend with your finger. It works. It's all about just warming up the wax enough to move it around. So let's go in with these spots and just set them apart as well. I'm going in with the Tuscan red. Some of these spots, I actually might add a little bit of black because they're quite dark. And then we'll go on with the Tuscan red. If any of these spots seem a little too jagged and a little too, you know, rough around the edges, I love doing, even if it's not in the reference, like this one, I'm not liking how that looked so much. You could do some fur details, just little fur strokes coming from the edge of that, and it immediately makes it look like it's more part of the entire snout, more part of the fur detail. It just blends in a little bit better instead of just having in a colored in block shape. So like that versus that, where like now I would go in with a few little strokes. Let it out like that. Oh, I had broken. So that brings me to my sharpener, because this is the first time I use a sharpener. I prefer an electric sharpener. This is just one I got on Amazon. I have an X-Acto one. There's so many different brands. All of them are great. The most important thing is that it gets it that sharp. That's why I prefer that to hand sharpeners. I use hand sharpeners as well, sometimes, especially on the go. But look at all of that pigment you now have to work with, and the sharpness to really get some of those fur details in. I do use light pressure after just sharpening. That way you don't snap the end again. For some reason, right after sharpening, they're a little bit more temperamental or easier to break, just because there's, you know, a very sharp, longer area that can snap. But I'm using just a little bit of lighter pressure. I'm very bad about using too much pressure sometimes, especially if I'm very into it. I just always press a little bit harder than I probably need to. But yeah, electric sharpener is definitely a big help. Keeping your pencils in a warm area. Like I said, I just got the set and haven't had a chance to put the TLC into like caring for them properly or having them in the right space to make sure that the cores are warm. I remember somebody taught that to me in art school. I was having problems with that, and they're like, well, just keep your pencil case in your car. I'm like, what do you mean? And I tried it, and it works great for helping with breakage or anything like that. Every pencil, not just Prismacolor, not just wax-based pencils, every pencil has breakage. I'm not sure about other brands, but I do know with the wax-based wax-based pencils, that storing them in a warm place is a wonderful trick. All right, so we almost have these blocked in. This is turning quite red. The spots are turning quite red over here. So I'm going to go in with this red. I'm going to add a few more fur details with the darker color. Like I said, just paying attention to the direction of the fur. So it starts to shift here. It's going this way the whole time, and then right down the center of the snout, it starts to go right down the center. So we want to keep an eye on that, so it doesn't ruin the effect of the snout and the fur, making sure that it looks three-dimensional the way we would like. Because like I said, fur plays a big part in that. So let's block in some of these shadows again. I'm gonna do some of the fur details here, and I think we got a pretty good surface, or at least a base of how to work with the fur. The leaf, you could push even further. Like I said, if you want to go next level, you can add even more veins. You can add little water droplets. You can add just a few little whitest white highlights with a paint pen and pop those in there. That would add a great deal of dimension. Because the colored pencil is not overly built up, you have more room to even add other media on top, which is a great option when you're trying to work with a drawing of an animal that you want to be quite detailed. I cannot wait to see what you guys end up with, because even me, like I showed you the drawing I did originally for some of the advertisements for the course. I did the drawing before I did the drawing. And I think it looks even different than this one will probably look when it's done. That's the fun part, is each time you work on a piece, it's totally different. You might just be in a different mood, feeling like working with the media in a different way. I'm going to show you how this is purple, but we don't have purple. So I'm going to go in with the pink really quickly on these spots that we mapped in, right there, right here. Then we're going to go in with the blue. Make a nice purple color, exactly what we want. This one's spot's quite dark, so I'm actually going to go in with a little bit of the brown as well. Then some of the blue. I would say with colored pencil, you got about 3 or 4 layers until it starts to get too built up. So you do want to be mindful of the colors that you're using to blend. Obviously, if we had a larger set, we would be, you know, let's use purple. But it's a really good example of how you don't need that. As long as you're mindful. So it's just a little bit of back and forth. That got a little bit warm, but we got it as dark as we would like it. Now we go back on with the blue to blend out. I'm going to add in a few little fur strokes like we were doing with the other ones. Now that's exactly how we want it. Same with this one. Those fur strokes really help create a lifelike effect. And it makes the spots look like they're a part of the animal. Okay, so going back in with some white to clean things up. This is when you could go in with a colorless blender. I'll show you. This is kind of where a colorless blender would shine in this area because there's not any shadows. It doesn't do much else than just take some of the graininess away. You need to be really careful when you're doing this though, because it can make it so the surface is basically maxed out with wax and you can't go on top. So you want to try to save the colorless blender for some of your final steps, because if you do it too early on, it'll actually cause some problems down the road. I'm putting in a few of these little wrinkles like that. That's quite cool tone, so I'm going to go on top with blue as well. We're just popping in some of those little wrinkles and stuff like that. I'm going to add this little wrinkle over here. This part is really about going back and forth between your reference. It doesn't have to be super exact. Like I said, nobody's going to be looking at this giraffe drawing and being like, hey, that wrinkle's not in the right spot. You know, it's a lot to the artist's discretion on how many wrinkles you want to add, where you'd like to add them. It's good to pay close attention to the reference, but if you mess up a little bit, it's not a big deal. I'm going to go back in with this red over here and kind of smooth out.
So Morgan, we are at time. I do just want to give everyone a chance to do a little bit of a show and tell.
Yes.
We're certainly happy with you to continue.
That's what I'm saying. I felt like this could
for
have
a
been
few more
like 5
minutes.
hours.
Yeah, totally. It's mesmerizing watching it come to life, for sure, from here too. So it's really great. So as we usually like to do, I want to invite everyone to turn on their cameras and share what they've done today, so we can maybe do a little bit of show and tell. You can
Yay.
set up your view in Zoom on gallery view, so you can see everyone else's pieces.
Let's see, participants.
Go ahead and share away.
I'm not very tech savvy, you guys. I'm so sorry. Let's see. I see participants.
In the upper right, there's a view.
Oh, I see it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Gallery view.
There we go. Okay.
I can see everybody now. The whole time I felt like I was alone.
That's amazing. These are fantastic, everyone.
You guys gonna bring tears to my eyes. This is so beautiful. I'm like I said, I've been an artist my whole life, but I am not really a course teacher. This is kind of a first go for me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome.
These are amazing.
Yay! It's so cool seeing what they were able to achieve, because I feel like sometimes there's so much to explain. I felt like, you know, I was a little all over the place trying to cover all bases, but it seems like you guys really understood because it looks so good. Oh my gosh. That's so awesome.
Beautiful.
Yay. Thank you, everyone. This is fantastic.
Awesome.
been great.
Great. Now, let me see. Thank you so much, Morgan. This was really great. Let's see if I
Yes.
can get you back on.
Now I feel like for the rest of the day, I just gonna want to finish this giraffe drawing. Now I feel like you guys might be the same way. I'm honed in.
So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free. We can maybe give a couple more minutes, Morgan, if that's okay.
Yeah,
And then
I got
close
plenty
it
of
out.
time. Like I said, the family's at the zoo looking at real giraffes. So
Okay. Any last minute tips for finishing out the piece, Morgan?
yes. So one thing I forgot to mention, well, not forgot to mention, but it's just an extra tip. So if things get a little built up, but you want to add that little extra oomph to your drawing, the extra paint strokes, or little pencil strokes, little fur details. If you feel like it's gotten built up and it's not quite where you want it to be, you have a go. So I have a few of these products. I can't tell you which one's my favorite. The most important part is that you'd be using, and I use this one as well. It's a matte final fixative. So if you spray your entire drawing with this, when it's completely built up and you want to add just one more go of final detail, this is a great way to recreate the paper texture on top and have a chance to go on top with one more round of detail. I use it almost every single drawing I do. It lets you go to that next level as far as adding some of the brightest whites, some little textures or things that might get muddied up as you're working on it and it gets really built up with the wax, or go on top with this, let it dry completely. And like I said, it's only important that it's a matte fixative. The fact that it's matte is that it's recreating the paper texture and you're able to go back on top like it's almost a fresh sheet of paper. The only thing is you can really only do it one time. Because I've tried to push it, I've tested the limits for sure. And if you go at it another time or two, sometimes it ends up chipping or you have other issues like that. So I highly recommend only giving it one go, but I'd spray it nice and even, get a really solid coat on it, let it dry completely, and you could go back on top with even more fur details, even more highlights for one more go. And that is one of my favorite finishing up tips, final detail, like finessing all of the details at the very end, because I am definitely detail oriented and I like to push it as far as it can go. So is it fade resistant? I saw that question. So some of them do have fade resistant. That's what I was saying. It kind of depends on the product. Some of these say contains UV light absorbers and different safeguards, pastels, and pencils. Says provides both workable and final. So some products do have the UV protection, which I highly recommend because, as we know, colored pencil doesn't have all of the light fastness that we would like sometimes. And if you leave it out, if you have it framed in a room over time, it could affect the pigment. So that is a good recommendation to have the UV light fast spray as well. Like I said, some of them have that feature, some of them don't. But yeah, to finish it off with that, that's a great final like polishing piece to do on your, and plus it makes it really easy if you're shipping these drawings to families and friends, stuff like that. It just seals it all in and makes it so you don't really have to worry about smudges or issues with the actual product. So yeah.